Thank you very much. You know, they frequently do mention that I delivered a lot of babies in my medical career. In the district that I ran in for Congress, it certainly did help. And having a large family certainly did help. But it is a delight to be here, and I appreciate very much this opportunity to visit with you. We are indeed facing some major problems in our country, and I think they're interconnected. A lot of times people ask what motivated you to run for Congress, and sometimes there'll be one issue. And if I had to pin it down to one issue, for me it's just believing in individual liberty. I believe if we understand that and promote it, we can solve most of our problems, because that's the opposite of big government. But I was really enthralled and involved in studying economics early on, and when the monetary system sort of collapsed in 1971, you know, they worried recently about us defaulting on our debt. But in many ways, we've done this quite a few times over the years. In one way, Roosevelt had us default on the debt because the government just stole our gold from us, and then they started printing money, and we had no rights to even own gold. And then when foreigners were denied gold in 1971, that was a form of bankruptcy. You know, we promised to pay you. It's a contract. Anytime you turn in $35, we'll give you an ounce of gold. But we had already abused the system. Probably the most amazing thing that's happened since 1971 is how long it's lasted, because we kept printing the money and the world keeps taking the money. And even today, in spite of all the tremendous debt and chaos, they're still placing a lot of trust in the dollar, even though the bonding agencies are saying, you know, that we've been downgraded once and we're likely to be downgraded again. It's a bad sign. And I think one of the reasons why it's like that and not improving is, in many ways, our leaders have been in denial. You know, they're talking about the huge deficit, and we couldn't do anything in the Congress, so we create a super committee, and magic is going to come from a super committee. First, it's not the way it's supposed to be done, and second, what are they doing? And the most they can ask for, if they don't do anything, they've been threatened, well, you have to do something, come up with these cuts, or there will be $1.2 trillion cuts of the proposed increases over the next 10 years. It's nothing. I mean, when you have a deficit in 1 year of 1.5, 1.6, you know, even the predictions aren't accurate, because you don't know what your income is going to be. You don't know what the unemployment insurance is going to cost. You don't know it. So they're just guesses in many ways. But this idea that they're going to cut. Now, I have a modest suggestion in the campaign. I've said that this is a serious problem. People are starting to wake up and saying, yeah, you're right, we should do something about it. So for a starter, I've suggested that we cut $1 trillion the first year in real cuts. Those on the receiving end get a little nervous now. Maybe this crowd's more on the paying end and like that idea. You're on the receiving end, that gets them a little nervous. What's going to go on? Because I claim that if we return our government and our country back to sanity, that you don't have to sacrifice. I can't understand why it would be a sacrifice to you to get more freedom and a better monetary system, less regulation, and allowing you to keep what you earn. And that to me sounds like a pretty good deal. It's the people on the receiving end, and too often we as conservatives think the people on the receiving ends are the people who are getting food stamps and welfare benefits, which is too much of. But there's also those on the receiving end that they get to gamble, and they like the free market when there's profits, but when there's any threat of loss, they like to socialize the losses. And that's exactly what happened in 2008. And middle-class America had to pay for this, whether it's through taxes on TARP funds or through the dilution of our money system through the inflation of the Federal Reserve. The Congress spent $1 trillion, but the Federal Reserve has spent $15 trillion. And a third of that, $5 trillion, went to overseas banks. And they're prepared to do that once again with that crisis over there. It's intertwined. People think, well, it's a Greek debt crisis. Well, there's a worldwide crisis. Greek is on the headlines right now. But they don't really care about the Greek debt. What they're caring about is that there was a foolish attitude in the banks of Europe. They bought all this Greek debt. And then there was also somebody that was just in the news had to declare bankruptcy, and he's been an insider for years, and he speculated 35-1 that they'd pull this off, and he's shocked that it failed. But but that goes to show how they can be, you know, their views can be distorted. But our banks, and Bernanke this week said, we'll be watching it closely. If necessary, we're going to provide the funds necessary to keep the system together, which means everything is falling on the dollar. And this has been in motion for a long time. It's this illusion that the dollar will bail out everybody and anybody. It's just not true. But for the time being, it is. And but where are the bailouts? It's mainly to take care of the financial system. A lot of people get a little bit concerned about, when I talk about free markets, say no regulations. Well, if you get rid of the federal regulators and had the regulations of the marketplace, they'd probably be tougher. Because if you go bankrupt, you go bankrupt. And the laws of bankruptcy would deal with it. Rather than the laws of politics to bail out, you know, the people who are too big to fail, and then forget about the people who are too little to care about. And this is why people get upset and they see it's unfair. People are demonstrating in the streets, and like I said earlier today, they have to figure this out, who are the good guys and who are the bad guys, just because everybody wants to complain about it. Some want more government, some want less government. I'm on the side of less government, just in case you didn't know. But as bad as it is, I still remain an optimist, and I'm always amazed that, especially when I talk to so many young people, they feel good about it because there are answers, and they're not devastating. We don't have to sacrifice. We just need to restore liberty. So, but it is going to be touch and go. But we're at a point where this can't continue, and we will have to make a decision. And governments usually reflect the attitudes of the people. You know, we can blame the president, the Congress, and the courts, but the people have a lot of responsibility too, because they've been quite happy to allow our government to overexpand, allow the monetary system to work and not bother about studying it. They didn't complain about the entitlement system because we were so rich. And nobody has over the years, and they're just starting to wake up about the unlimited expansion of our forces and money spent overseas. We spend over $1 trillion a year overseas. I think it makes us much weaker. And history shows that this is the way empires come down. Just as recently as the Soviet system, they came down. And ironically, where they finally lost it all was in Afghanistan. You'd think we'd just sort of wake up and say, let's not wait for the whole thing to fall apart. So I think the easiest place to cut is overseas spending, and you don't have to cut medical care for the elderly or medical care for the children, and you could work, we could work our way out of this. But if we continue to this, everybody loses. There is a financial collapse on our horizon, and it's just a matter of looking at sound economics, rejecting what so many of us had been taught in schools, that we need government to take care of us from cradle to grave. It doesn't work. We have to have more faith and confidence, understanding on how freedom works. If we did, believe me, we could take care of ourselves a lot better than the government's taking care of us right now. Thank you very much.
Yeah, the Glass-Steagall Act that was passed by Roosevelt administration back in '33, and that was repealed in 1999. Is that a good thing to have back in the, you know, that's before Congress now? You know,
that's a real interesting question, because I did not vote to get rid of Glass-Steagall. Glass-Steagall says that banks are bankers and they're not investors and they shouldn't mix it. Yeah. In a free market, I believe banks should do what they want. Don't defraud, take their own risk, go bankrupt when they have to. But when I didn't vote for it to be removed, because I knew you were on hook. The taxpayer gets on hook. They were gambling with derivatives, and I said, look what happens if it goes bad. So this would only encourage the bankers to even do more. So I didn't vote to repeal it. But in the free market, you wouldn't have prohibitions. So I would still take that position. I think there should be prohibitions, so I would vote to put it back on. Only because the taxpayers guarantee everything the banks do. But we don't have free market banking, so that's the reason that that I oppose that. I don't think that you should.
I appreciate your stand on it. Thank you.
Okay.
Dr. Paul, I have a question, and this kind of relates to something off of the subject of what we're talking about in the monetary, but number one, actually there's three of them. Where do our rights come from? When do we inherit those rights? And then as you as a president, how do you feel we should honor the God that gave us those rights? And it kind of answered your question in the last one.
Okay. I talk about natural rights and God-given rights, and I agree with Jefferson that we get our lives and our liberties from our Creator. But I also go to the extension of saying if it's your life and it's your liberty, everything that you do, everything you create, and all your productivity should be yours and not the government. So, which means that we wouldn't have income taxes. But the other one on what should the government's role be in honoring our Creator, is that the?
Yeah.
I think that's a personal thing. I think that that's what freedom does. It gives you the choice to make your decision on how you will honor it, and it's best reflected in our personal lives and the character of the individuals. And I'm a strong opponent to theocracies. We do not have a theocracy, but sometimes people lean in that direction. Theocracies exist around the world. I think they're very, very bad. I think a lot of people will ask, well, what are your litmus tests going to be on picking Supreme Court justices in your cabinet? And they want to find out, you know, of what religious values you have or whether you accept them. I think it's more important on their full explanation and understanding of the First Amendment in order for them to protect your right to make your own choices, express yourself, practice your religious beliefs, and demonstrate that through character.
The U.S. Treasury website indicates that about half the nation's debt is owned by the Fed, and we make interest payments, of course, to the Fed, and then some of the money is returned back to the Treasury. Does the Congress have a handle on how much of that money is returned back to the Treasury?
Yeah, you can find those figures. He's talking about, see, the Fed creates money out of thin air, and they buy treasuries, and that's us, and then we have to work and send in money to the Treasury, and then they pay the Federal Reserve interest on those bills. And this is how the Fed works off budget. They get to spend billions and billions of it, but they don't use up all that interest. So some of that interest is returned to the Treasury. So the net amount is significant, but the real part about it is that they're totally independent and secret and have no oversight, and that's why I have been demanding, you know, an audit of the Federal Reserve to find out what they're doing. And we've had some success. We know more about the Fed now than we've ever known in its 100-year history, and this has come out about, you know, because of the 2008 crisis. But the one thing that I have proposed in my plan of cutting $1 trillion and trying to get back, you know, working our way out of this mess, because somebody asked me, they said, well, how are you going to do it? You can't eliminate the deficit completely, so you're going to have to raise the debt limit, and you won't support that. And I said, that's right, I'm not going to support any more debt. But what I do in my program is, since we owe the, since Treasury, and that's us, owes the Federal Reserve $1.7 trillion, I just write it off, because we don't need to be paying their interest. And that lowers our debt limit, so we have a window of opportunity. But for me, it would be a window, and it would remain closed after that. You'd have $1.7 trillion, you know, of debt that you could work with, and by that time you should have your house in order. So, and the Fed does. I mean, there's too much mischief there, and it wouldn't hurt the country, believe me.
Just to follow. So what you're saying is that a lot of the debt, some of the debt that we have, can be just wiped off the books because we paid for it through inflation?
You'd wipe off the debt to the Treasury. If you own a Treasury bill, or an insurance company owns Treasury bills, or foreigners own Treasury bills, no, I wouldn't wipe that off. Just what the Federal Reserve owns.